So Apple just had their biggest event of the year. So you know what time it is. It's time to get far out. Welcome to Mike Texts It Out, and this is a channel where recently, I've been talking about gaming. And for some reason, I'm talking about Apple again. Even though I said, I was like, look, I'm done. I'm done talking about it. But I'm going to incorporate gaming somehow. That's right, I'm going to add in Apple's #1 gaming service, Apple Arcade. And we're going to talk about that as well. I'm just kidding. No one talks about Apple Arcade, not even Apple. So I'm just going to talk about the event, and I'm going to go over the things that I observed as a long-time Apple user, the things that I kind of like and disliked. So let's hop in with the most important things, the AirPods Pro. I'm just kidding. Basically, they look the same. They added a speaker to the case. It works with the Find My app now with like the direct tracking so you can track it and everything. It's a really boring upgrade. They're supposed to sound better and the noise canceling is supposed to be better as well as the transparency mode. And they added the ability to swipe and change the volume, which with those little stems, I don't know how well that's going to work. I kind of like the solution that Sony did with their headphones when they let you program it. So one side of my headphones, I have it where it does media controls. The other side, if I tap, it lowers the volume. If I hold, it raises it. To me, that makes the most sense. Overall, I think it's an alright upgrade. It doesn't really seem like it's going to be the upgrade for people that already have them. But Apple, come on. Give us some colors with the AirPods. I know you're like, oh, the power beats and the beats are for poor people and they like colors, so that's what we'll do there. And then the AirPods will just be the same color. Like, come on. Could have at least did a new color. And I'd be like, wow, maybe it's worth upgrading. They did black or something. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, this is kind of a big one, is the Apple Watch. Now, I still got my Series 5 because at this point, the Apple Watch has become like the iPhone and almost every other phone where it's just like, you know, I'm not really upgrading every year because the returns are not worth it. I am, however, upgrading this year because my battery life is crap now. With that being said, I was looking to be blown away by the Apple Watch Series 8, which actually, to be honest, I wasn't, because I already saw last year they did a screen upgrade, which is like the only thing they can really upgrade on the Apple Watch. They made the screen bigger, they brought it almost to the edges, and I was like, you know what? They're not going to do anything big with the Series 8 this year. And I was actually completely right. The Series 8 is a boring upgrade. They added a temperature sensor for a cycle tracking. If that's important to you and that's the reason to upgrade, that's cool. I'm not saying that it's a useless feature, but obviously it's a very minor upgrade. And they added crash detection. But the battery life is exactly the same. I've been waiting for a bump in the battery life and they haven't given it to me. But they did add a low power mode, which is supposed to give you up to 36 hours, I believe, of battery life. That kind of strips away some of the features like auto workout and always on display. They give you more battery life, and that can more than double the battery life according to what they said. So there is that. I believe that mode is also coming into the older Apple Watches as well, so that's not even a real reason to upgrade. Essentially, the baseline Apple Watch is stagnant. The SE is basically still like an older generation Apple Watch that's cheaper, that doesn't have half the features. I'm not even going to talk about it. If you want an SE, I mean, it's a good watch. Every Apple Watch is good at this point. Like, unless you want a very specific feature, the SE is probably fine. Or even an older Apple Watch. In fact, if you're looking at the Series 8, I would suggest just getting the Series 7, unless you really want the crash detection and the temperature thing for cycle tracking. Last I checked, it's on sale for $100 off on Amazon, and it's basically the same thing. The battery life's the same. The only thing it doesn't have is a temperature sensor, and it doesn't have the crash detection, but otherwise the exact same thing. Now, of course, the reason I wanted to talk about the Apple Watch is because one of the biggest things that I've been waiting for, there's two big things that I complain about, and that is the indoor run tracking. It doesn't do a good job, and I wish that you could just tell it what your stride was and it would adjust accordingly, or that would just do a better job of actually detecting your stride when you're running indoors. I know you have to run outdoors, and I ran a lot outdoors, but the calibration is just never right. Maybe my stride is different when I run indoors. That's probably what the issue is, but still, there should be a way to compensate for it. Anyway, that's not being addressed at all, so that's out of the window. But the second thing is better battery life, and they finally did it. And I know I just talked about the Apple Watch Series 8 and that battery life, but what I'm talking about, of course, is the Apple Watch Ultra. Woo! That thing is weird looking, but it's supposed to be like a rugged Apple Watch. They wanted to keep it elegant, but make it rugged. give it a rugged design, make it out of titanium. They made the screen flat so there's less chance of breaking it or scratching it, and they brought the bezels right up to the edge to give it a little bit more protection, which I really like, because as someone who's scratched this screen a lot and scratched these bezels a lot, I literally scratched my Series 5 within the first week or so that I got it, and I run with it, and it gets all nasty and dirty and stuff. I think it looks pretty cool. They also added the action button. It's an orange button. That's for action. So they said it's customizable, but it can do things like start your workout, like as a quick start button, because right now you have to fidget and, hit the button, start your workout, and it does a countdown thing. But that can just start your workout immediately, like especially if you're running on a track, you want to get exact times, you can just hit it and it'll start your workout. Or if you're doing like intervals or something like that, then you can hit that to switch intervals. You can kind of set it to do whatever you need it to do. It's also ready for diving. It's got, of course, dust resistance like the regular Series 8 does. And it's got 36 hours of battery life. So finally, they addressed the other thing that I was talking about earlier with the battery life. Like, they really addressed it. They finally gave us an Apple Watch with good battery life. But of course, they made it $800 and they made it this extreme rugged sports thing. I will give them this. It only comes with cellular, which makes sense for a watch like this. It's supposed to be for people that are kind of doing like extreme sports and stuff. So it makes sense to only be cellular, because someone who's doing that kind of stuff is probably not even going to want to have a phone with them, and they're going to need that extra battery life, because when you're on cellular, baby, woo! As someone whose last 2 watches have been cellular, when you're on that cellular, your battery goes pretty fast. So that 36 hours, that might turn to like 10 hours. Who knows? They're going to need that extra battery life if they're going to be out there doing that type of stuff and only having the watch with them. So yeah, of course, Apple finally gives me one of the things that I want. I was always like, they give me better battery life, I'll definitely upgrade. And then they put it on the Ultra. I'm not spending $800 for an Apple Watch. I'm not an extreme sports person. I literally run indoors 3 to 5 times a week. I don't really need it. I wish that they would just give better battery life to the actual base model, like the Series 8. At this point, they got 3 models staggered already. The Series 8 being the standard one, I feel like the battery life should be the same. It's obviously not going to have some of the features, things like the action button, or they have a specific watch face for activities that also has a night mode. And also the other thing with the Ultra is that it is 2 times brighter. It's up to 2000 nits, which makes sense because if you're like extreme situations like diving and stuff, you're going to need a brighter screen. The other thing with the Ultra 2, aside from the screen being brighter, is also bigger. Just those features are ready to make it more distinct. I'm just saying, bring that better battery life to the middle model, because it's still pretty expensive. I mean, it starts off at $400, yes, but that's for the smaller 41 millimeter. Plus, it's like an extra $30 to get the 45 millimeter. Then, of course, if you go to cellular, that's an extra $100 on top of that. Like, my Apple Watches always cost me $529. So realistically, it's not really that far from the Ultra. I feel like they should just add that extra battery life, because they already have a cheap Apple Watch anyway. Leave that battery life the same. Give the better battery to the 2 higher models. I understand that the Ultra is thicker, but they could at least somewhat improve the battery on the regular Apple Watch. Well, let's hop over to the last thing. Of course, that's going to be the iPhone. Now, the iPhone, it's like a double-edged sword this year. They had to do some weird stuff to solve a problem that they started years ago. When they got to the point where they had OLED on all the phones, it really made the Pro a hard buy. Even with the 13, even though they added the high refresh rate display to the Pro, it was still a difficult buy because they're all exactly the same. So this was the year that they finally had to make the lineup make sense. And they did that in a couple of ways. One of the things that was stupid before was if you wanted the Max, which a lot of people like big phones, you had to get the Pro Max, which is an $1,100 phone starting off. At least when the 12 came out, they bumped up the storage to 128 gigs, which is doable. I just do the 128 gig version. But when they had like the 10s Max and the 11 Pro, those started off at 64, so you would have to bump up to $100 more just to get decent storage. So now at least, it's making a little bit more sense, but still, if you wanted a big phone, you had to spend $1,100 when the other cheaper phones started off at $800. So they finally fixed that issue. They got rid of the Mini, which was cool. I know some people that really liked it, but obviously it was going to be a niche product. A lot of people don't want small phones. They got rid of the Mini and they bought the Plus back. We haven't seen a Plus since the iPhone 8. They have not used a Plus name. They bought it back. We got the iPhone 14 and we got the iPhone 14 Plus, which are the same sizes as the Pro and the Max. This makes so much sense. This makes sense. And it still has the OLED screen. It still has the same old notch. It basically has the older design, and it has an older processor. That was the one thing they tried to slip under the radar. It still has the A15 Bionic from last year's phone. They basically just added another GPU core to it. They talked about how the GPU was improved, which means the performance is pretty much going to be the same, which is fine because, to be honest, Apple's chips are ahead of Qualcomm's by quite a bit performance-wise. So even if you're getting last year's chip, that's still going to last you a very long time. If you have last year's phone, definitely don't upgrade. But if you're getting the iPhone 14 this year, then that's fine. So essentially what they've done is they've repaired this lineup and made it make sense. Yes, it kind of sucks that they're using the same chip from last year in the baseline phones. But going forward, it won't be as rough because this was the year that they had to do it. There's going to be a year that they had to do this where they were going to have to put the same chip back in the baseline phone to make the Pro make even more sense because now you get better performance and the features for that price hike. Now, in my opinion, they probably should have lowered the price of the regular phone considering that they're using last year's chip. But of course they didn't because it's Apple. So we got a pretty good base model and a plus model. Of course, 60 hertz OLED, some camera improvements, 2 cameras the same as before. You don't get the telephoto, but I would argue that the telephotos always kind of suck, so it doesn't really matter. So those are probably the phones that you're going to want to get unless you have last year's phone. There's really no reason to upgrade. Now the Pro, of course, is where we get our biggest changes. We get the A16 Bionic, so we got that new processor. We get the always on display, which I didn't hear a lot of people talking about this, but when they did WWDC this year and they were showing off this whole lock screen customization thing, I said this only makes sense for them to focus so much on the lock screen if they're finally going to do an always on display this year. I called it and I'm happy about that. Nobody cares because I called it on a live stream that nobody watched except for like 9 people. But still, I called it. It's there, recorded on video and video history. So yes, it's getting an always on display finally. And of course, the biggest thing is the design change. They're getting rid of the notch and they're doing that pill-shaped cutout. There were some rumors that was going to be a pill with the camera beside it, but it makes a lot more sense now how the rumors ended up that way because pill area is going to be kind of functional. It's going to display information and expand. And if you have like 2 activities going on, like if you have a timer and you're listening to music, then it'll do like a little circle beside it. And I think that's where those renders got that from. So you can do stuff like have your music controls up there or display the song or whatever. Things like that, or display your timer in the little pill shape. I think it's cool how they're kind of taking advantage of what is essentially a disadvantage. I do like the redesign. It's still going to be distracting. People are still going to complain about it. The technology is just not there yet to completely cover it up, and Apple has invested a lot in Face ID, so I don't think that they want to go to an under-screen fingerprint sensor at this point. And plus, me from a personal standpoint, I also like the quality of Apple's selfie camera, because if they do the little hole punch one, those aren't really great quality anyway. The fact that they have to do all this depth sensing does make it a really good front-facing camera. And yes, it does suck when you look at like an Android phone and it's got the little tiny hole cut out, or it's got the special thing that hides the camera like they do with the Galaxy Folds. But it's a trade-off either way. I personally like Face ID better than I liked fingerprint sensors. It never worked well for me, so I'm fine with that. So the Pro, of course, is the most interesting phone because it's new. They finally did somewhat of a redesign, the first major one since the 10, finally getting rid of the notch, which has been a signature, still in the regular 14. But yeah, this is going to be the design of the future that the regular phones would get. Now, I will say color-wise, because people like to talk about the colors. I don't really care that much. I'm a boring person for the most part. I usually just get black or white unless there's a color that I like this navy blue one for the 12 Pro that I've had for the last 2 years. But the colors kind of suck. I don't know, that purple I don't really like. It's kind of like an ashy purple. They should have put some lotion on it. I don't know what they were doing. And then the regular iPhone 2, yeah, the colors weren't popping that much this year. They kind of go back and forth where they have really bright poppy colors and then they have more dull colors. It seems like more of a dull color of the year for them. So if you care about that, the colors in my opinion aren't that great. So in my opinion overall, the AirPods are kind of a boring upgrade. It's probably exciting for someone that doesn't have them. The Apple Watch, I feel like they should have done more with the 8. The SE is fine. It's the cheapest model. It starts at $250. It is what it is. The Ultra's cool. It's priced high, but also I expected it to be more. Honestly, I was thinking it was going to be $1,200. I was surprised it was only $800. So I think in Apple's ecosystem, in Apple's world, that's a fair price for the build quality and what you get with that watch. It's just not for me, and it's too expensive. And I do think that the Series 8 is already pretty expensive, and it should probably have better battery life. But I'm going to keep saying the same thing over and over again until that changes, which I may never. The iPhone finally makes sense. They finally nailed the lineup. Both phones are the same size. They got the regular and they got the big ones, and they're both the same size between the regular and the Pro. And they made a distinction with the performance and now the appearance. So the Pro is making a lot more sense as a phone. You get the extra camera. You got the always on display with the high refresh rate, with the new design, etc. And the regular iPhone is still a great iPhone for 90% of the people. The people who do want to spend that extra money, they're finally getting something for their money. Me personally, my Apple Watch is 3 years old, my phone's 2 years old, so I'm upgrading both this year. I might get the Series 7, to be honest. I might get the Apple Watch Series 7. The features for me on the 8 aren't worth it. It just depends on what deals they have, so I'm going to wait a little bit and see. The iPhone, I'm just going to get the regular 14 Pro, the base model, because 128 is enough storage for me. A lot of my stuff is in iCloud anyway. That's what I'm doing. If you saw my videos back when I had the 10S Max and I complained about how big it was, I will never go back to a big phone because I like being able to use my phone one-handed and have it be comfortable. That's just me personally. But let me know what you think. Are you guys upgrading? Is it weird that I'm doing an Apple video randomly after I haven't really done that many recently? Let me know in the comments. I'll be back on Sunday with the gaming news. I am considering spinning this Apple stuff off to a separate channel, so this could possibly be the last Apple video for this channel, but we'll see what happens. But if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell notification to get notified when I drop a video. And always do at least 2 things at the same time. Peace. Oh, I get it. It's far out because with a new Apple Watch, you can go far out. There's a battery, and then they got the satellite calling. Oh, yeah, far out. Far out.